This is a little bit different to be holding the session virtually. And we do try to make these sessions very interactive. So I do encourage you to ask questions as we go along, although we'll leave time at the end of each session for you to ask questions as well. But if you prefer not to speak up, type your question into the chat feature. And then Julie or Katie then can read out the questions for you if you'd prefer to do that. But let's keep it interactive. I would love to hear from you. These are great tips. They're just tips. There's no right or wrong resume. It's your resume. So please, again, ask any questions. So you can move forward, Julie. So really your resume can be the first impression an employer is getting of you. If you've just applied for a job through their website or through LinkedIn or through Indeed.com, this can be your first impression. So that's why you really want to make sure you have a well-written resume. You want to reflect some things about yourself that show the employer that you're a good fit for the position that they have available. And so we're going to go through the things you're going to want to include on your resume today. And again, no right or wrong. Everybody's going to have different experience to put on their resume. So keep that in mind as we go through. Next slide. There are some things, hopefully each of you will put on your resume. It can be different orders. Chronological is best. Nowadays, you don't have to include your address on your resume if you prefer not to, but minimally, you always need your name and some contact information. So phone number, email, something like that, so you can be reached. We're going to talk about doing a career objective versus maybe a skills summary in the top of your resume for employers to find out a little bit more about you. We're going to talk about listing your education, any work or project history you may have, any volunteer, clubs, sports, teams you've been on, things like that. Other accomplishments, you've already done in your history. We're going to talk about all these things. So next slide. In most cases, it would be best right now to have a one-page resume. What I like to say as a recruiter, though, one page is two sides. So no one is going to fault you if you go over one page because it's still one page. It just happens to be two sides to one page. But it's going to depend on what you've accomplished so far. You don't want to put too much on there. You want it to be balanced on how much information you're including. So we'll go through that today. Next, there we go. So your work experience section, again, this can be sometimes the hardest thing for someone your age to work on. Maybe you have not had a lot of jobs yet or any jobs, but you have done things already that you can include in an experience section. You don't have to call it work experience. You can call it project experience. You can call it life experience. A lot of people do that, okay? So don't fixate on that word work. But this is where you can put in experiences that you've already had that have given you skills and experience that are going to make you a good fit for the job that you're applying for. It can include any kind of job that you've had, even if it's working at a fast food restaurant or a Target, or you've been a nanny. Those are still great experiences you've learned from those jobs. So again, it doesn't have to be a technical job. Something like that. It can be a non-paying job. You don't have to get paid for work for it to be very relevant. Okay. But for any type of job that you've had, you are going to want to list out, did you work for a particular company? How long did you work? What did you do? We're going to talk about bulleting things underneath each of these items instead of doing a paragraph or a sentence form. It's much easier for recruiters and managers to review resumes that have bullets versus sentences, or a paragraph. Education, most of you are in high school, so that's what you're going to list, which high school you're in. You can put your current year, or you could put your graduation date, expected graduation date on there. But that's what you would list so that they know for sure. what your education is. Moving forward, as you're going maybe into college or post-secondary, then you can include that as well. You can list, classes, especially if there are classes relevant to what you're applying for. So if you've taken some computer science classes, some AP classes, things like that that are relevant. If you're going, for a job that requires advanced communication skills, if you've done a public speaking class or, a communications class, those things can stand out on your resume. So make sure you include those. Also, if you know what you're going to do after high school, you could list that. You can say, I've already been accepted to a certain school, or I am taking some of these classes next quarter. If you still have a year or two to go in high school, you can just list what you're planning to focus on. Or you can even be as in general saying, I plan to pursue data science upon graduation. You can list things like that. Go ahead. The career objective, at this age, you may not have a career objective. Hopefully what you're trying to do is find a job or an internship that's going to help you build upon the skills and experience you've already started to gain. And that could be your objective. As simple as, I am looking for an internship that's going to help me grow my skills and experience. Some people will, instead of doing an objective statement, say, here's the experiences I've gained so far. And list out some of the experiences and skills that they've gained. Again, you can always say, I'm looking to enhance these or looking to build on these skills. Okay, so it can be a little bit less specific than when you've had 5 to 10 years of experience. At that point, it can be more specific on your objective. Next slide. There we go. So your key skills, especially if you are looking for a more technical type of position, if you are going into some type of engineering, software engineering, even project management positions, any type of technical position, a lot of times they're going to look for people that have some specific technical knowledge. So in a skills section, you can start maybe like programming languages, and then you can list any languages that you have, like Java, C#, whatever. Maybe you want to list some of the, there's a lot of different, right now, data is huge. So if you've worked with any type of databases, list databases, and then, DB2, Oracle, SAS. There's visualization tools, if you know Alteryx, Tableau, you can list those. You may not have these yet, but those are things you might be gaining knowledge of as you go through internships and through schooling. But you may already have experience with some type of email system, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Even calling out those skills can be beneficial, because especially Excel is a skill used by a lot of different people in a lot of different positions, having to work on pivot tables, having to put in formulas. So if you're more advanced with Excel, call that out as well. Behind Excel, you can put formulas, pivot tables, all of that, VLOOKUPs, things like that. People look for that.
So, Katie, excuse me, but Dana asked, should career objective be the first section in the resume?
Usually objective is at the top of the resume. Yes.
Okay.
Good question. Good question. It sort of sets the pace for the rest of the resume, if you will. So especially if you're calling out why you want that particular job. So, yeah. Other people have really good skills already, as it says here, maybe you've been editing video or blogs or things like that. That's also really good skills to include on your resume. As I mentioned, some positions require giving presentations, dealing with the public, maybe scheduling events. So again, if you've done things like that, list that, that you're good at public speaking, you've coordinated events, and maybe that was for some school organization or a nonprofit that you're working with. That's still good experience to list in the skills section. Next slide. Okay. Activities. So again, you've probably participated in many activities. Again, they don't have to be school related, but if you've been in school clubs, if you've been in your school sporting teams, if you've, volunteered, these are all great activities to capture on your resume. If you've had any type of leadership opportunities in these clubs or organizations, make sure you list that. So if you're on a robotics team and you were the captain, list that. Or even if you were just a participant, what did you do on that robotics team? Because what you did was very valuable. So you're going to list that. But maybe you were the captain of a sporting team. A lot of volunteer organizations, they have board members. So if you were a board member on a volunteer organization, list that. You can write down, the dates, and a lot of times maybe you're in those multiple years. So you can list, 2019 to 2021 if you want for your dates in that. But again, this is showing skills and experience that you've gained through these activities that can be valuable to that employer and that position that you're applying for. So here's some examples, so if you do volunteer, just list the name of the, here it's a hospital, but there's lots of volunteer opportunities out there for organizations, nonprofits. So just list, and again, if it was a volunteer or if you did something, maybe you were an event coordinator for that particular organization, list that, and again, the dates of it. Next slide. Also, if you have achieved some recognition already, through school, through, again, a volunteer effort, these are also good to list on your resume. If you've, I also tell people in this section, similar to education, if you have received certifications already, because I know some of you may have already worked on that, do under awards and achievements, you can say, I gained this certification. That is an achievement. You did that on your own. You had to take a test to get that certification. So you could list that here or under your education. So the biggest tip I give, and it's to people of all ages, all levels of career experience, is always customize your resume to the particular job you're applying to. So what I recommend is you create one generic resume that you keep adding to throughout your whole career. Truthfully, my base resume is over 7 pages long. It will never go out to an employer like that nowadays because I customize and I pick and choose from the things I've done and get it into a 2-page before I would send it out. So start now creating that base resume, and then every time you apply for a job, you're going to create a copy and name it, come up with a naming feature that you like, if it's the year and the company or whatever, but then you customize that resume to reflect the skills that are required for the job that you're applying for. Okay, so that's what you want to start with today, is work on a great base resume, and then we're going to give you an opportunity to already tailor it for a particular job for next week for a mock interview. Okay, so work on that base resume. It should not take you long to customize it for any job, but do work on that and keep adding to it. So I try to do this, at least a couple times a year. Remember to add things to my resume that I've accomplished since the last time I've updated it. It's much easier if you do that versus waiting multiple years in between when you're looking for jobs and then going back and trying to recapture what you've done in that time frame. Okay, so if you can get into a habit of updating it a couple times a year, that's always a best practice.
A question we have in the chat is, should we add a description to our volunteer experience?
You can. I would say it's going to depend on how much room you have on your resume. So if you need to fill up room, add more of a description there to what you did. But base it on, how balanced the resume looks. But always, if it's very relevant what you did for that experience to the job, you're going to want to capture that. You may trim something else, but make sure you always capture the most relevant experience for that particular job.
So when we list our volunteering experience, do we also like list it in the experience section and then in the activities, or we just list it in one place?
I would list it one place. So decide for you which is the best. Do you have other work experience and then you have volunteer, or is your volunteer really your work experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And list it just once, and call it out. Great question. Okay. So yes, again, as I mentioned, this is your first impression a lot of times for the employer looking at your resume. So that's why we want to make sure that you're capturing everything, it's relevant, and it's honest. It's really what you have experience with. So next slide. There we go. So don't let there be a simple mistake on your resume. This is, it happens frequently. And I will tell you, some of my managers, if they catch a spelling mistake in a resume, they may not want to interview that person. So it is very critical that when you're reviewing your resumes, don't just rely on spell check. Make sure you have a couple people review that resume for you, because they may catch things that you don't because you've been working on your resume. And then we read what we think we wrote versus maybe what we actually wrote. And so by having a couple other people review your resume, they're going to be able to give you some good feedback on maybe things that are misspelled, or maybe you missed some punctuation, or there's a better way of saying something. Or they say, this really isn't clear. Maybe you should restate this. So it's always good to have other people review your resume before you send it out. So keep that in mind. So yeah, so don't rely on the spell checker, because, and especially we have a lot of words, right, that can be spelled differently and they mean something slightly different. So that's where people can help you if they read through it and they might catch that. Look for that incorrect spelling and grammar. And again, I hate to say it, but some managers are, they look for the little imperfections in resumes and will not consider those people. So just be aware of that. It's definitely not everyone, but there are some people that do that. So you do want to sell yourself. And just like when we get to the interviewing tips and tricks, we're going to talk about telling what you did. You're always, we're always working in teams. And as a team, we're accomplishing things. But you did a lot to help that team accomplish what they accomplished. So even in your resume, you want to call out what you did. If it's a project-based example that you're putting down there, or a team, again, you want to describe what you did. You don't want to over-exaggerate what you did as well, or what you accomplished. Anything on your resume is fair game to be used in an interview. And what we see a lot is resumes coming in already from students who say very proficient in these languages. And then they might list a few languages. Well, our managers, I will tell you the truth, they love that, because they're going to say, okay, so you're very proficient with Java. Tell me more about that. Or they'll ask them what they think is a pretty tough question. And if the student can't answer it, to the manager, they've over exaggerated, they're not proficient. So I always recommend, don't use words like that. Don't say you're proficient unless you really know you are. In an interview, they're going to ask you what you've done, and then tell them what you've done. And they're going to be like, oh, she's really proficient in this, let them come to that conclusion, but be honest about what you've done with any skill or anything that you've listed on your resume. Okay, you don't have to be an expert in everything. Even if you say, okay, yeah, I'm blogging. I just started. I've only done 2 blogs so far. This is what I've learned. That's great experience. You don't have to be advanced in anything or proficient in anything at this point in your career. It's your learning, and these are the things you're doing to learn. So it reflects well on you that you're doing things like that. So
Katie,
yep.
just to add on to that, so and don't just look at the classes and technical projects you maybe have had a chance to do, which you absolutely should look at those. But again, we talked about volunteers or other things. So really look through all of that to think about different skills that you want to list. You mentioned coordinating some volunteer event. You know, that's something to list here. And again, so think broad about things you have done, even if it's only at a beginning level. It's okay to list as long as you're saying how much, like have had a few experiences with, or beginning level, or in some cases maybe use, you know, what would you say for a medium level, Katie? So maybe it's more than beginner.
I actually recommend don't even calling that out. Don't try to put a level of experience. Just put your skill. You know, in the interview, it's going to come out. You know, they're going to ask what you've done with this. You know, it will come out. You know, yeah. Good question or good comment. Yeah. So next slide. So again, we want your resume to look balanced on the page. So we don't want too much detail, you know, that's crowding the page. That's where you're going to want to look and say, okay, do I have too much information in there on this one particular experience? What's going to be most relevant to this particular job? And let me focus on that. And maybe you add a couple more bullet points to one experience, and then you take a couple bullet points away from another, so that you're really highlighting, you know, what that relevant experience is. Doesn't mean you can't talk to the other experiences in the interview, but again, highlight what's going to prove that you're a good fit for that job. What have you done so far? So that's where customizing that resume every time can come in to play. So maybe in your base resume, you have 5 bullet points under each experience. Well, then in the customized, maybe you add 2 to 1 and take, you know, 1 down to 3, 1 down to 1 or 2. That's what you want to do when you customize your resume. But keep adding to that base and putting in your experiences. You can always take out and add for a specific job, but keep it balanced. You don't want it too full, the page too full. And that's where if you really have a lot of relevant experience and the page looks crowded, let it run over to that second page, you know, front and back. If they print it out, it's still one page. Okay, but definitely use bullet points versus a paragraph style or, you know, a few sentences. Try to keep them short, you know, and highlight the things that you did in that experience. If it's volunteer, if it's work, if it's a project, you know, just put in a few bullet points. I always say odd number is good, but if it's 2, it's 2, it's great, you know, but if you have 3, that's wonderful. I don't know why people tend to go with odd numbers. 3 or 5 tends to be a good number of bullet points. So again, we mentioned this, you're part of a team always, even if it's in your class, you're part of a classroom team working together to learn a subject. But what did you specifically do? So you want to talk to both, but be prepared, even on your resume, to call out what you specifically did in any situation. They're going to cover this in interviewing as well. You need to be able to say, I did this. And then here's a great example where, you know, if you have experience, you know, in a high volume restaurant, you know, saying I managed the rush after home games is much more impactful saying I gained customer service experience, you know, working at a restaurant. Because a lot of us know, even if we haven't worked in a restaurant, we know what a rush looks like. We've been part of that rush, and we've been impressed by the people who manage those crowds. So how you phrase things can make a difference. You know, it can be more impactful by how you phrase it. So hopefully this is a good example, and we can help you with others if you have questions there. Okay, so here's an example. This to me would be a well-balanced resume, okay? But are there things that, you know, we could take out? Sure, for, you know, right there, with their address and contact information. You can shorten that, so if you needed more white space, look at where you can take away. Even here, take out the address and the blank space in between the name and the email. You can save yourself 3 spaces right there that you can then use for more detail. So sometimes it's even just looking at little things like that. Do I need all this, or could I put things on 2 things on 1 line versus having, under education, there's 3 lines being used. You might, if you really needed the space, you might use 1 line or 2 lines and capture that same information. So there's ways to manipulate, the formatting to allow you to add more to that resume and keep it to 1 space or 1 page, but still have it look nice. So just realize that. And I think we're going to talk about applicant tracking systems. Oh, good question. Should we include our GPA under education? I will tell you the truth, that is going to be up to you. I would definitely say if it's a higher GPA, call it out. If you feel like your GPA is a little bit lower, don't. That's fine. We actually encourage managers not to base a lot of their fact finding on the GPA. We want them to get more information about the person's experience. So if you are juggling a part-time job, some activities, and schoolwork, sometimes GPAs don't stay as high. But does that mean you're not as good? Because look at, you are juggling a job, projects, or extracurricular activities and schoolwork. And you're gaining experience in all of those areas. So to us, experience is more valuable than a GPA. Will some people look at that? Yes. So put it if you want. It's not necessary though.
Should we use unweighted or weighted GPA?
Again, great question. I would say whatever you think looks the better, and it's going to sell your skills more. I would say go with that one, just to be honest. Yeah. Great question. Let's go to the next slide. So cover letters, we get asked frequently, and I know Angie gave us a great example here in a recent meeting where even as an experienced professional, she did a cover letter to get her job that she got last year. And the managers called that out and said that was part of the reason they looked at her was her cover letter. You will hear a lot of people saying a cover letter doesn't make a difference. But the thing is, you don't know. You don't know who's going to look at a cover letter and who's not. So I always do recommend, if you want to differentiate yourself, do a cover letter. Okay. And then here we have some good tips on how to do that. And you do want to, again, make it unique for that particular company and that particular position. You cannot do a template and keep reusing that. The reviewers are going to know pretty quickly that that's a template, and that's going to be more of a negative than a pro when they look at it. So customize it. Look at the company's website, call out if they have values or mission statement that speaks to you, call that out in the cover letter, and say, I'm interested in your company because your mission is this, and that aligns to my values and what I'm trying to accomplish in my career. So I'm very interested in working for a company like yours, so make sure you do that research on the company, and that's where you can call it out, is in your cover letter that you did that, and this is why you're interested in them. You can expand on your experiences in your cover letter. If you think you didn't have enough space in your resume, highlight it then in your cover letter, and you can say, as it reflects in my resume, I did this, but I did so much more than on my resume. I was responsible for this. I did this. This is where you can add more information to any experience that you want to call out for them. Try to find out, some listings will have a manager name, or maybe by going online, you can figure out who the manager is. It's better not to say to whom it may concern, even if it's dear hiring manager is better than, to whom it may concern. But sometimes by doing a little research, you can figure out, who the hiring manager is, or who the recruiter is. Sometimes that's listed on the requisitions. So you can certainly add that as well. So, but this is also where you can show a little personality in this cover letter. And a lot of times I know I've added some humor to the cover letter. And I might say, this is my very first cover letter. I would appreciate feedback. You know, even that is showing them a little bit about your personality, and that you're really interested in hearing from them though as well. You know, and see if somebody takes you up on that. I did that most recently, and that's why I just added that, because I got a cover like that just 2 weeks ago from a student saying, this is my very first cover letter. I'm not sure if I did a great job or not. If you're willing to provide feedback, I would love it. And I did. I gave them feedback. I really liked their cover letter. So things like that can help show your personality too. Okay.
Katie?
Yep.
We got a question from Shrutha.
Okay.
Would recommendations from previous employers or teachers help in any way?
They can. I would say a lot of times on the resume or adding that here is probably not going to be the best place to do that, but you can list that on your resume that say reference available upon request. So most people are not listing any specific data on the resumes anymore around references. People used to add a second page that maybe had references and had the person's name, their title, their company, their contact information. Due to data privacy, a lot of people aren't as comfortable sharing that anymore. So, you know, you can put on your resume, you know, references available upon request. In your cover letter, if you do want to call it out a little bit more, saying, I have excellent references from, and then list, you know, like, you know, my manager from this job or my teacher from this class. Please let me know if you're interested in getting those references. You know, you could do something like that.
Katie, if I could add something too, when they're going to hear a little bit more about LinkedIn. One of the features of LinkedIn when you establish an account or a profile is that you can have someone provide a recommendation for you,
Yep.
or a testimonial about you in that profile. And so sometimes we look at that as employers, we sort of look at that LinkedIn profile and we might see some things there that speak to your talents as well.
Yeah.
And
Great tip.
Oh, another question I had was, so I know for me at the Target like internship and interview process, all of our like resume was online. Is there like any way you can do to make that stand out more when you can't do like a cover letter or you can't have it detailed?
So going through the applicant tracking system, is that what you're asking, Katie?
Yeah. So we didn't give them a resume at all. We just we had to fill in kind of all the things you'd put in a resume on their website.
Oh, really? They didn't allow you to attach one at all?
Yeah, no, they didn't have you attach it at all.
That's interesting. And I would say part of that is their applicant tracking system, which I think we have a slide coming up on that. There we go. See, great timing, Katie. Every applicant tracking system is different. And that's what I'm going to tell you. If you apply for 5 jobs, you're probably going to go through 5 very different questions and ways to apply. So some applicant tracking systems will allow you to attach a resume, and you can do it as a Word document or a PDF. Some, like Katie's saying there at Target, she evidently had to probably copy and paste all of her work experience from her resume into fields in the applicant tracking system. And probably what they're doing is in some applicant tracking systems, it's hard for them with the different formats that people put their resumes in. So the one recommendation I was going to say is using columns in a resume is not really a good thing. Because most applicant tracking systems can have a hard time unless it's a PDF. If you save it in a PDF format, it will usually come through, but some applicant tracking systems can't handle a PDF. So by keeping it more in that format that we saw a couple slides ago, very black and white, just, you know, chronological down the page. Thank you, Julie. This will go through very well in an applicant tracking system. And basically, it sounds like what Katie did, it had to put this into the fields in the applicant tracking system. And then that probably auto-generated a version of that on the back end for the manager when they viewed her profile is what it did. So it took some of the formatting that could have confused the system out of the situation, if you will. So some applicant tracking systems will allow you to attach a Word or PDF document, but then they have a quick view for managers to look at, and that view strips all the formatting out. And that's where if you had columns, it's going to mix up the words, you know, because it's not going to understand. It should have taken, you know, the sentence from column A before the sentence from column B. It's going to mix them together. So that's where using columns can be a little detrimental. Now, the workaround for us, the recruiters and the managers, is we have to download that resume and then open it up. And then we can see the formatting that you have used when you attached it. But will a manager do that? You know, that's what you have to figure out. Do you want to make it easier for them and just use a little bit more plain formatting versus trying to make it nicer? Some applicant tracking systems will allow you to attach more than one document. So you can attach your cover letter as a separate document. You could attach your resume. If you have references that you would want to attach, you could certainly do that. People do that. Some people are attaching copies of their certifications. So it's up to you if you want to do that. You don't have to, as long as you have certifications listed on your resume. Most of the times that is good enough for any company or any manager. As it says there, if the applicant tracking system will only allow you to attach one document and you have a cover letter, just cut and paste the cover letter onto the top of your resume and then save it into one file. You know, your cover letter is the first page, your resume is the second page, and then attach it to the applicant tracking system. And that way, everybody who gets a copy of your resume, all the manager and the interview team, they're going to read your cover letter for sure as well, because it's in the same file as your resume.
So Katie, quick question from Davna. She said, do all companies use applicant tracking systems? And I'm just sort of thinking that some of the larger corporations are probably more inclined to use a tracking system because of the volume of resumes that kind of come through.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
I would say it's going to be dependent on the size of the company, and if it's, you know, definitely, I would say a lot of smaller nonprofits probably do not have a tracking system. Smaller companies, a lot of family-run companies, you know, because they tend to be smaller, they probably do not. You're right. They may actually just have an email address and have you forward everything to an email address at that point. And then they may on their side have an Excel spreadsheet that they're entering all the data into the Excel spreadsheet to say, oh, we got 20 candidates for this position and they want a quick snapshot of who applied. But yes, I would say out of, you know, the larger medium-sized companies, they're all going to have applicant tracking systems. You will not know it. You do not see it. You go to their website, you go to target.com, you go under jobs, you find a job you like, you hit apply. Well, what you don't realize is the website just took you to their applicant tracking system. You know, you don't need to know that. You don't need to know which one that they have. But a lot of times when you go to apply for a job on the application, it might say iSIMS or it might say Workday. You know, there might be some indication on there which applicant tracking system it is. Nowadays, a lot of them will connect. So again, if you find a job on Indeed.com or a job through LinkedIn, they will actually use your profile, you know, especially LinkedIn. A lot of times they don't make you upload a resume anymore. They're taking your LinkedIn profile and putting it into the applicant tracking system. So that's what they're using. They're making it a little bit more seamless for you, so it's easier for candidates to apply for a job. So you'll see a lot more of that coming. Not every company is mobile as well. So a lot of companies, you can apply for jobs through your phone. There are still companies who do not have that ability either, you know, where you will actually have to go to a website and be able to pull it up on a laptop or tablet, you know, to apply for a job. So it does vary from company to company.
So Katie, there's two in chat. One is from Samiksha. She indicated, do I link the LinkedIn, do they indicate the LinkedIn account that they have under references, or how is that stated on their resume?
Great question. Most people will put that right under their contact information, you know, where they have their name, and then they have a phone number, then they have email, and that's where a lot of people will put their LinkedIn. And so again, a lot of times they're not using a separate line for each one. You know, they may have two lines. Here's my name, here's my phone number, here's my email address, here's my LinkedIn account, you know, to save space on their resume. But you would put that where you put your contact information, like your email and your phone number.
Okay. And Shriyutha asks, since we want to make our resumes specific to the position we are applying for this internship, do we make a separate resume for each company we want to apply for? I think I heard you say you do want to customize it, and that employers are kind of seeking that. They're desiring that, right?
Yeah. Yep. So that's what I would do. You know, mine's actually called Katie's base resume. That's my base resume. I never want to send that to an employer. I will make a copy of that and I will say 2021 Target if I want to apply to Target, you know, Target resume or something like that. And then I'll go through and I'll cut out what's not relevant for that job. I will add in bullets that are relevant where they should be. And I'll get it down to 2 pages. And I can do that because of how many years of experience I have. So 2 pages is what I shoot for in my resume.
All right. There's one more. And Devna, do you want to, I think you had wanted to kind of ask this question in person. Would you like to do that? Or do you want me to state it through chat here?
Yeah, sure. I can just ask out loud.
Okay.
I was wondering, so in cases where you know that you're going to be emailing it to the recruiter or the hirer and it's not an applicant tracking system, is it okay to use a more colorful template, or should we always stick to the black and white?
That would be up to you. If you know they're going to see it in the format that you put it in, keep that. It can reflect your personality, maybe, you know, it might make you stand out a little bit more from someone else. So if you want to do that and you know that they'll see it in that format, go ahead and use that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we are seeing people do a little bit more of, they're putting graphics in as well by their skills. And again, they look nice until the applicant tracking system takes the formatting out. But then if you download the file and look at the resume, it is a nice looking resume. And again, it can make you stand out from others, you know, because of that, and reflect your personality a little bit more, show creativity, you know, some of those good skills that people are looking for. Yep. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? How do we do on time? I hope we're doing okay.
We're doing okay. We won't worry.
Okay. So yeah. And I know that Angie's going to go over LinkedIn. So, you know, ask her if you have any questions about compare and contrast, you know, resume to LinkedIn profile, because there's going to be some of that you're going to want to be aware of as well.
I had one last question just about the resume piece, a quick one.
Mm-hmm.
But how long is it appropriate to list high school activities once you graduate? Because I'll be going to college this fall. So just when I'm applying to new opportunities in college, is it okay to still have things from high school listed on there?
Yes. I would say for a number of years, you're going to want to include that, but especially as, going to college, looking for internships or summer job opportunities, that's going to be part of your experience, that you want them to see. And even I would say upon graduation from college, you may still have that on there as you're looking for your first full-time job.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.